Hello and a very good afternoon to all News9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. We continue to bring you the latest from battleground Israel. Now in the latest, at least 13 Israeli and foreign hostages held by Hamas have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in the past 24 hours. Now this is based on Hamas's armed wings briefing. In a surprise assault, Hamas militants stormed Israeli communities near the Gaza border and fired barrages of rockets in an attack that claimed more than 1,200 lives. Israel says Hamas has taken more than 150 people hostage, including both civilians and security forces. However, they also say that this is not going to stop Israel from giving a befitting reply to Israel. To Hamas. Now there, the Hamas terror group in fact has claimed that 13 Israeli and foreign hostages in fact it was holding in the Gaza Strip were killed during the past day in Israeli airstrikes. This has happened in the past 24 hours and this is in fact based on Hamas's armed wings briefing. The terror group has claimed in a statement that 13 hostages, which also included foreigners, have died in the Israeli airstrikes. In a surprise assault early Saturday around 6:30 a.m., Hamas terrorists stormed Israeli communities near the Gaza border and fired barrages of rockets. More than 1,200 people have lost their lives and Israel says that Hamas has taken more than 150 people hostages, including both civilians and security forces. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Hamas will be taught a lesson that the generations, in fact that the coming generations will remember, and Hamas will pay a huge price for what it carried out. An unprovoked, in fact, war that was called upon on Israel. 13 prisoners, including foreigners, were killed in 5 locations that were targeted by Israeli fighter jets. That's what the Hamas terrorists have said in a statement. This is the latest that we're getting from Israel, battleground Israel. At least 13 Israelis and foreigners, held by Hamas have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in the past 24 hours. The Hamas had also warned that this week every targeting of their people without warning will be met with the execution of one of the hostages. But this has not stopped the Israeli army, the Israeli government, in fact, from teaching Hamas terrorists a befitting lesson. The Israeli forces have already, in fact, been continuing with their airstrikes, among other massive steps that they've taken against the Hamas terrorists in a bid to teach them a befitting lesson. Was an unprovoked war called on Israel by the Hamas terrorists earlier on Saturday. Now, during its murderous onslaught just last weekend in the southern Israel, these terrorists, Hamas terrorists, are believed to have taken around 150 people to the Gaza Strip where they're being held hostage. The Hamas terrorists are resorting to cruel measures against the Israeli forces. They've not even left babies. There are several images that have gone viral on social media showing the measures that Hamas terrorists have resorted to, the cruel measures that Hamas terrorists have resorted to, not even leaving the babies. They've beheaded babies, they've killed women, elderly as well as children. And now Israel has vowed to teach Hamas a lesson that the coming generations will remember for years to come. Every country has the right to defend itself, and Israel is doing just that. It was an unprovoked war that was called upon on Israel without any provocation. It was the Hamas terrorists who just barged into southern Israel and not only killed people but are also said to, in fact, have it is being said that they've held around 150 people as hostages. They've also said that every targeting of their people without warning would be met with the execution of one of the hostages. But this has not stopped the Israeli forces from giving a befitting reply to the Hamas terrorists. The Israeli forces now also planning a ground invasion. A group of women students staged a protest to express solidarity with Palestinians here on Friday. They were detained by the police, raising slogans denouncing Israel for its bombardment of Gaza. They gathered at the B.R. Ambedkar statue near Tank Bund in the heart of the city. They were carrying a placard reading "Long Live Palestine." The police detained the protesters who were raising slogans "Down, Down Israel." The police personnel were seen taking away the protesters in a police vehicle. A police officer said there was no permission for the protest, and this was the first protest in Hyderabad since the latest conflict between Israel and Palestine began just last week. Right on your screens, visuals coming in from Telangana, where a group of women, in fact, staged a protest to express solidarity with Palestinians. The protest took place earlier today. These students were seen raising slogans against Israel for its bombardment on Gaza. And there you can see the placards read "In Solidarity," read the "In Solidarity with Palestine." They gathered at the B.R. Ambedkar statue near Tank Bund in the heart of the city. The police have taken some of these protesters, have detained some of these protesters who were raising the slogans "Down, Down Israel." This is a pro-Palestine protest being held there in Hyderabad. The police personnel also there seen taking away the protesters in a police vehicle. A police officer, in fact, has also said that there was no permission for the protest and these students were defying the orders. This was the first protest in Hyderabad since the latest conflict between Israel and Palestine began just last week.
Palestinian avam ka sangharsh zindabad. Zindabad, zindabad. Palestina ko vimukti kawali. Vimukti kawali, vimukti. Nee. Election code వచ్చేసింది మీకు తీయడానికి.
Switching our focus to J&K now, pro-Palestine protest was not only held in Hyderabad but also in J&K's Budgam after Friday press. Right on your screens, visuals coming in from Jammu and Kashmir's Budgam, where a pro-Palestine protest was held in Budgam. People there raising slogans against Israel for its strikes on Gaza. We just saw a while back how a group of women students were staging a protest to express solidarity with the Palestinians. And they were also detained by the police, and here right after Friday prayers in J&K, miles apart. Here in fact we're seeing now people holding protest against Israel. That's a pro-Palestine protest right there being witnessed in Jammu and Kashmir's Budgam district right after the Friday prayers. This is not for the first time that Kashmir is witnessing a pro-Palestine protest. Now here right after the Friday prayers, a pro-Palestine protest yet again witnessed in Budgam, where people were seen raising slogans such as Palestine ke mujahideen, hum tumhare saath hain. Switching our focus now, the United Nations has warned of devastating consequences after Israeli military asked over 1 million Gazans to relocate to south within 24 hours, adding to the speculation that Israel may soon begin a deadly ground assault from its northern side. Israeli military said their relocation order was due to Hamas operatives hiding in the tunnel under the Gaza city. Residents of Gaza, move south for your personal safety and your families. Distance yourself from the Hamas terrorists who use you as human shield. IDF will continue to operate significantly in Gaza city in the coming days and wishes to avoid harming civilians. That's what the Israeli Defense Force said in a statement. The UN has called on the Israel military to take back the mass relocation order for the Gazans to avoid the tragedy turn into a calamitous situation. The Israeli Defense Forces has asked around 1 million people to move away from North Gaza. And there you can see they've also said do not be seen with any of the Hamas terrorists. You will not be pardoned. IAF is now preparing for the deadly Gaza invasion, the ground invasion. Do remember that the Gaza Strip is occupied by over 2 million Palestinians living in extremely cramped conditions. Despite Israeli warnings to leave the Strip, the Palestinians residing in area possibly cannot leave in large numbers, with neighboring Egypt only allowing a trickle of refugees to enter its land. This means that a large number of Gaza citizens will be trapped in the city at a time when Israel commences its ground invasion, which it has in fact already started. We have seen in the past experiences also, that civilian casualties in such cases are simply unavoidable. Israeli military has also said that their relocation order was due to Hamas operatives hiding in the tunnels under the Gaza city. We keep stressing that every country has the right to defend its territories, and that's simply what the Israel is also doing after Hamas went on to wage a war, an unprovoked war against Israel by firing thousands of rockets towards Israel. And now Israel has vowed to teach Hamas a lesson that the coming generation will learn for years, will remember for years. One of the defense spokesperson has also spoken with the media regarding this. Let's listen in.
Security fence, do not approach the border, only go south. again out of a concern for safety of non-combatants. I'll continue to read. Hamas terrorists are hiding in Gaza City, inside tunnels, underneath houses, and inside buildings populated with innocent Gazan civilians. Civilians of Gaza City, evacuate south for your own safety and the safety of your families, and distance yourself from Hamas terrorists who are using you as human shields. And the last paragraph, in the following days, the IDF will continue to operate with significant force in Gaza City and will make extensive efforts to to avoid harming civilians. That's the message that we issued a few hours ago to Gazan civilians, and the aim here is to minimize the damage to civilians. There are significant combat operations ongoing, and we are preparing for future and the continuance of our combat operations, and out of an understanding that there are civilians here whom are not our enemy and we do not want to target them, we are asking them to evacuate so that we will be able to continue to strike military targets belonging to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. That is the purpose, and I think that's an important update, relevant for you to be aware of. This is a first notice that we gave. We understand that this will take time. It's not an easy process, but we have issued this guidance, and the aim of the evacuation is simply to save lives. As you may have read in the media, this was communicated to UN authorities, first and foremost to UN authorities, and the IDF is in communications and liaison with UN authorities, transferring information to them and also listening to what the UN informs Israel about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And as I've said many times during the last 7 days, the IDF remains fully committed to the law of international conflict. We will carry ourselves accordingly, in sharp contrast to the enemies around us and to Hamas, which is in total disregard of anything related to values, norms, and definitely not the laws of armed conflict. The other things that are important for everyone to know, I think, are related to casualties. Unfortunately, the number of Israeli casualties has risen again to 1,300 Israeli civilians and soldiers, and more than 3,000 wounded. There is a massive national effort involving almost all of the security organizations and many of the ministries of the Israeli state, which is focused on taking the bodies from the same communities that we spoke about yesterday, like, for instance, Kfar Aza, Be'eri, and Nahal Oz, and many other communities in the entire southern area, collecting the bodies, bringing them to a center in Tel Aviv, identifying them, and then making sure that their next of kin, their loved ones, are able to take them and to provide them a final and respectable burial. That's ongoing. It is a tedious and long and very detailed process, taking lots of resources. We have never ever in our history been forced to deal with such a situation, and it is ongoing. It will take days, and as we match and identify more and more of the Israeli bodies that are uncovered in the communities, we will have more information about missing persons and perhaps the whereabouts of people that we are still at this stage not aware of where they are. And clearly loved ones are looking for them, asking questions and demanding those answers, and we are working hard at providing those answers. Other than that, the Northern Front, which we have spoken about a few times, has been relatively stable over the last hours. We are on high alert on the north, as we have been over the last few days, with enhanced troops, vigilant, watching the actions of Hezbollah. And same thing could be said about the Golan Heights. So we spoke about Lebanon and the Golan Heights. As we begin the 7th day of this war against Hamas, I wish to emphasize what our aim is. Our aim is to take all of Hamas's military abilities and strip them away. At the end of this war, Our intention is that Hamas will no longer have any ability to strike or harm or kill Israeli civilians. That is the purpose of what we're doing now inside the Gaza Strip. That is why the Israeli Air Force has been delivering significant amounts of ordnance, of bombs on the Gaza Strip. And that is what we will continue to do as this war unfolds and as we will deal a decisive blow to Hamas for the horrible, heinous acts that they have done.
Meanwhile, the IDF continued with its relentless bombings of Hamas targets in Gaza Strip. UV and infrared cameras on Israeli planes and drones recorded the demolishing of Hamas targets using missiles. Israel has been bombing all targets that are associated with Hamas, and several Gazan neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble. The death toll continues to rise since Israel declared war on the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas after it carried out unprecedented attacks on Saturday that killed more than 1,200 people. At least 1,537 Palestinians have been killed and an additional 6,612 have been injured since the weekend's assault, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza. In the West Bank and East Jerusalem, at least 36 people have died and more than 650 have been injured. That's what the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Ramallah has confirmed. The IDF continuing with its bombings on Hamas. These are the Hamas targets in Gaza Strip that are being targeted by the Israeli forces. These are the UV and infrared cameras, in fact, that have on Israeli planes and drones that have recorded the demolishing of Hamas targets using missiles. Israel has been bombing all targets that are associated with Hamas, and several Gazan neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble. Meanwhile, the death toll also continues to rise since Israel declared war on the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas after it attacked Israel in an unprovoked manner. The Flotilla 13 elite unit was deployed to the area surrounding the Gaza security fence in a joint effort to regain control of the Sufa military post on the 7th of October. The soldiers rescued around 250 hostages alive. 60 plus Hamas terrorists were neutralized and 26 were apprehended, including Mohammed Abu Ali, the deputy commander of the Hamas Southern Naval Division.
תן לו ריבון! תחצו, תחפה עלינו החוצים. יש?
My colleague Manish Jha, who is at the Israel, also brings us the latest update vis-a-vis this particular development. Let's take a listen.
इजराइल की सरकार ने हमास द्वारा बंधक बनाए गए लोगों को छुड़ाने का जिम्मा अपनी सबसे खास एलीट फोर्स सेरत मतकल को दिया है। सेरत यानी कि स्पेशल फोर्स, और सेरत मतकल को द यूनिट 262, यूनिट 269 के नाम से जाना जाता है। इतिहास में इस यूनिट ने कई बार बंधकों को छुड़ाने में कामयाबी हासिल की है। इजराइल के मौजूदा प्रधानमंत्री बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू, पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री एहूद बराक, बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू के भाई, ये सब इस यूनिट का हिस्सा रह चुके हैं। ऑपरेशन एंतबे में इन्होंने 103 इजरायलियों को फिलिस्तीनियों के कब्जे से छुड़ाकर युगांडा से लेकर वो आए थे। इसके अलावा इस यूनिट ने लेबनान वॉर, सीरिया वॉर और दूसरे और बड़े ऑपरेशन में भी हिस्सा लिया है। कहते हैं कि इस यूनिट में सिलेक्शन का तरीका बहुत ही खास होता है और सिलेक्शन होने के बाद इन्हें 2 साल की कड़ी ट्रेनिंग दी जाती है। इनसे इस तरह से ट्रेनिंग ली जाती है जो सामान्य तौर पर कोई भी इंसान नहीं कर पाएगा। कहा जाता है कि इस यूनिट के एक एक सोल्जर 120 किलोमीटर से लेकर 150 किलोमीटर तक बिना थके दौड़ सकता है। वो रेगिस्तान में रह सकता है, वो बिना खाए पिए कई दिनों तक पर्वतों में रह सकता है, वो कई दिनों तक बगैर सोए भी रह सकता है। कहा जाता है कि इन्हें हर हथियार चलाना आता है, इन्हें जासूसी करने भी आती है, इन्हें सर्च ऑपरेशन करने आता है, इन्हें दुश्मन को कब्जे में लेना भी आता है और इस तरीके से ये बंधकों को छुड़ाते हैं। इस बार एक बार फिर बंधकों को छुड़ाने का जिम्मा इसी खास फोर्स को है। ऐसे समय में जब पूरी दुनिया में ये सवाल है कि क्या गाजा पट्टी से उन बंधकों को छुड़ाया जा सकेगा या नहीं, तो फिर सबकी नज़र इजराइल के इसी खास सेरत मतकल फोर्स पर है और अब देखना होगा कि क्या अपने इतिहास को ये यूनिट फिर से दोहरा सकती है या नहीं।
Right on your screens, the Flotilla 13 elite unit deployed to the area surrounding the Gaza security fence in a joint effort to regain control of the Sufa military post on the 7th of October. The soldiers rescued around 250 hostages alive. That's a big win for the Israeli forces. 60 plus Hamas terrorists have been killed and 26 have been apprehended. This includes Mohammed Abu Ali, the deputy commander of the Hamas Southern Naval Division. Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the inaugural address of the P20 summit in Delhi recalled the terrorist attack on the Indian Parliament in 2001. He added how no consensus was shaped on the definition of terrorism back then. Modi says India has been suffering from cross-border terrorism for years, referring to Pakistan. But it's only now that the world is realizing how big of a problem, how big of a threat terrorism really poses. He calls for a unified front to fight the menace of terrorism. He says to move forward, the world needs to remove obstacles in the way of global trust with a human-centric approach. Prime Minister Modi says it's pertinent to look at the world with sentiment of one earth, one family and one future. Listen in.
कि भारत दशकों से क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म का सामना कर रहा है। आतंकवादियों ने भारत में हजारों निर्दोषों की जान ली है। संसद के नए भवन के पास ही आपको भारत की पुरानी संसद भी दिखाई देगी। करीब 20 साल पहले आतंकवादियों ने हमारी संसद को भी निशाना बनाया था और आप जानकर चौंक जाएंगे कि उस समय संसद का सत्र चल रहा था। आतंकियों की तैयारी सांसदों को बंधक बनाने की, उन्हें खत्म करने की थी। भारत ऐसी अनेकों आतंकी वारदातों से निपटते हुए आज यहां पहुंचा है। अब दुनिया को भी एहसास हो रहा है कि टेररिज्म दुनिया के लिए कितनी बड़ी चुनौती है। टेररिज्म चाहे कहीं भी होता हो, किसी भी कारण से होता हो, किसी भी रूप में होता है, लेकिन वो मानवता के विरुद्ध होता है। ऐसे में टेररिज्म को लेकर हम सभी को लगातार सख्ती बरतनी ही होगी। हालांकि इसका एक वैश्विक पक्ष और है जिसकी तरफ मैं आपका ध्यान आकर्षित करना चाहता हूं। टेररिज्म की परिभाषा को लेकर आम सहमति ना बन पाना ये बहुत दुखद है। आज भी यूनाइटेड नेशंस में इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन ऑन कॉम्बैटिंग टेररिज्म कॉन्सेंसस का इंतजार कर रहा है। दुनिया के इसी रवैये का फायदा मानवता के दुश्मन उठा रहे हैं। दुनिया भर की पार्लियामेंट्स को, रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स को ये सोचना होगा कि टेररिज्म के विरुद्ध इस लड़ाई में हम कैसे मिलकर काम कर सके।
Switching our focus now, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin plans to visit Israel today. He's the second high-ranking U.S. official to come to Tel Aviv in just 2 days, showing strong support for Israel and working to figure out what additional military help they might need in their conflict with Hamas. During his visit, Austin will meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. According to a U.S. official, this visit follows a visit by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken just the day before, where he promised the U.S.'s support for Israel in a meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Austin made it clear that the U.S. is committed to getting Israel what they need to defend themselves, including ammunition and support for its Iron Dome interceptor system. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken delivered a strong message in support to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during his visit to Tel Aviv. The aim of his visit was to prevent the ripple effects of the conflict between Israel and Hamas from spreading further. In an effort to support Israel, Blinken is also planning to visit key American allies including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, some of which hold influence over Hamas, the Palestinian terrorists who launched an attack on Israel just last Saturday. He reassured Netanyahu that as long as the United States exists, Israel will never be alone. Blinken called for restraint from Israel in its response to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. He emphasized the importance of taking all possible precautions to avoid harming civilians, distinguishing democratic governments from groups like Hamas, which deliberately target civilians in the most inhumane manner. During his visit, Blinken also toured a donation center. Among the volunteers was a young Israeli-American woman who, along with her Israeli boyfriend, survived the Hamas attack during a rave party in southern Israel.
I'm standing here today alongside our Israeli friends and all those who reject terror to help find the glimmers of light, even in this moment of deep darkness, and to make clear that as long as there's the United States, Israel will never be alone.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed deep concern about the catastrophic increase in civilian casualties in Israel and the Gaza Strip during the recent conflict between Hamas and the Israeli military. He also criticized Washington's Middle East policy, stating that it had failed to consider the Palestinian perspective. Putin accused the United States of attempting to control peace efforts between Israel and the Palestinians and of not making an effort to find compromises that both sides could accept. Instead, he argued that the United States had been imposing its own solutions on the conflict. Furthermore, Putin emphasized the necessity of creating a Palestinian state and placed blame on the U.S. policy in the region for the recent escalation of violence in the region. Russian President Vladimir Putin has reacted on the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, the terrorist organization Hamas, and he has expressed deep concern about the dramatic, catastrophic increase in civilian casualties in Israel as well as the Gaza Strip. He's also criticized the United States' Middle East policy, stating that it had failed to consider the Palestinian perspective. Putin emphasized the necessity of creating a Palestinian state and placed blame on the US policy in the region for the recent escalation of violence. But moving on now, my colleague Sumit Chaudhary, who is currently in Israel, is reporting from ground zero from where the terror attack took place. Let's take a look at what he brings us.
We are now at the Gaza Strip, and I can show you the exact locations, exact places where the attacks happen, and after that the terrorist has infiltrated. You can see the west of terrorist also. You can see how destructive, how they damage the whole area. Especially you can see the west, the bulletproof jackets they have been carrying. You can see the weapons, you can see the shells they have, you can see the cartridges also lying in this, and these are the area where they have been using all these things, and the Hamas terrorists entered in all these locations, and the massacre or how they killed people, especially the children, especially the women in this area, is unimaginable. You can only imagine the area. You can't imagine the feelings and especially what exactly happened when all these things happen in this area. We are in the Gaza Strip and near the Gaza Strip, and the offensive operation have been started by the Israeli Air Force, and more important is they have been extended their line of attacks. That means the artilleries and the tanks have been moved there. The ground teams have also moved, and they are waiting to go inside the Gaza. And we have been showing you the place which is now the command and the action center of the Israeli forces. From here they have been moving forward. They have been doing their operations, conducting their operations, and most importantly, earlier this was a village. People have been living there, but now it has been turned out into the war zone.
These are the visuals coming in from Israel, the war-torn Israel, where now Israel has vowed to teach Hamas a befitting lesson after it waged an unprovoked war against Israel on Saturday. Earlier on Saturday, it has also taken several people hostages and has warned Israel that every time it attacks a civilian, it is in fact going to harm these hostages. Every targeting of people without warning, that's what the Hamas terrorists have said, will be met with the execution of one of the civilian hostages. However, that has not stopped Israel from giving a befitting reply to the Hamas terrorists. Thousands of people have lost their lives, and during such incidents, we always see people becoming casualties inadvertently. That is the nature, unfortunate nature of such incidents, such wars. And this time, we continue to stress that every country has the right to defend its territory. This was not a war that was started by Israel, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that this is the war that will be ended by Israel, and in a manner that will completely eradicate Hamas. And the coming generations, in the coming years, will remember what exactly Hamas had to go through after it waged an unprovoked war against Israel this Saturday. The IDF also is continuing its relentless bombings on Hamas targets in Gaza Strip. There have been visuals coming in from Israel where also one could see in the brutal manner Hamas has killed not only the elderly, women and children, but they've not even left the babies. My colleague Neha Khanna was in conversation with former Deputy Foreign Minister to Israel. Let's take a look.
Joining me now to talk about Israel's continuing offensive against Hamas in Gaza is the former Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, who is in fact currently a member of the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli Parliament. I am joined by Anan Ru. Mr. Ru, thank you so much for joining us here on News9 Live. This is obviously a very difficult and challenging time for your country. So we appreciate you taking the time out for us. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you very much.
And I can tell you that, our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Israel right now. But, I want to ask you specifically about some important developments that have taken place. The mayor of the Israeli city of Sderot has said, we are evacuating the city to give our army a chance to win. Now, this is, of course, near the border with Gaza. This seems to be yet another indication, Mr. Ru, that Israel is preparing for a ground offensive. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's too soon to talk about, and obviously we can't discuss any type of proposed military action. I do think, however, that two things must happen. First, the world needs to know that Israel will do whatever it takes to strike back at Hamas and ensure the safety of our people and our borders. We are coming together strong after a disastrous first strike by Hamas, a hideous massacre, things that even ISIS wouldn't do. Little children being decapitated, families burned in their own homes, these are things that haven't happened to Jews since the Holocaust. But we are a strong nation. And so we will strike back and make sure that we end terror. And the second thing is we need the world to stand by us. And I urge everyone to do so because we are a country defending itself against terror. And terror doesn't discriminate between different nations and different races and different ethnicities. Terror must be brought down, must be defeated. And this is what we're doing here.
I understand. And I also understand that you don't want to give away sensitive military and operational details, but I'm going to ask you this question. Your Prime Minister has said, we will destroy Hamas, something that you just referred to. The Defense Minister has said, we will wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. The question that many are asking now is Israel also planning a capture of the Gaza Strip?
Are we planning of holding the Gaza Strip?
Taking control of the Gaza Strip. Is that on the agenda as well?
I don't know. I have to say that I don't think that's something that Israel is interested in, nor have we been interested in. If you look back at, recent history, the last 2 decades, we are not in control of the Gaza Strip. Many around the world are mistaken about it because we left the Gaza Strip in 2005, and then Hamas took over, held an election, and these were the last elections so far because since then, Hamas has been using the people of Gaza as human shields in order to create terror and chaos and try and annihilate the state of Israel. That's its declared cause. And so we will do whatever it takes. This is what our government means, and meaning that if we need to go in, and that's inevitable, we'll do that. If we need to take hold temporarily of certain areas in order to clear them off terrorist and Hamas headquarters, we'll do whatever it takes. But we never wanted to have any involvement with the people of Hamas and regulating the area. We left there at a very high cost in 2005. Many forget that Hamas had the opportunity to create a great place and to make the Gaza Strip into a great place. They got funds and assistance from all over the world. We made many concessions for Hamas in order to, stabilize the humanitarian aspect. And time again, Hamas chose war and destruction So we will not allow this to further impact our people.
Okay, let me ask you this. I interviewed the Palestinian ambassador to India yesterday, who said, we've heard many times in the past that Israel would carry out a ground invasion. It has never happened till date. And he insinuated that it was because Israel has always had this fear that its soldiers could be captured and held hostage. Is that not a real concern? If there were, let's say hypothetically, to be a ground offensive, is there not a real concern that soldiers could be taken hostage? Or is Israel prepared to pay any price right now?
You know, the life of our soldiers and the life of our people, that's always the main concern. That's always the devastating part. We are a country that cherishes life. Hamas cherishes death. And so we take very seriously every decision we make when we send people out to war. So yes, that's always a huge factor. But what happened a few days ago, the massacre done to the people in the south of Israel, and the fact that we have over in the Gaza Strip, including young children, young mothers, Holocaust survivors, people with disabilities, we will not sit still and we will strike back. And when we say we will do whatever it takes, I really recommend to anyone who is tracking down our, record with Hamas to not rely on anything that has happened in the past, because what they did is not similar to anything that they did in the past. And so the gloves are off, everything is possible, and we will do whatever it takes to secure our borders and our people. But yes, we will always do so with high morality, knowing that human lives is something to be cherished. And this is how we also conduct our strikes.
Delhi has the fastest growing metro network among G20 nations. From 6 stations in 2002, it today has 286 stations. Reliability, cleanliness and affordability have set the template for other Indian metros. The architect of this modern-day world-class marvel is E. Sridharan. Watch the extraordinary life of Metroman E. Sridharan streaming now on News9 Plus. Download now.